All right, welcome to this next episode of Better Call Saul. And today we're going to talk about what would you do if your MLS went out of business. So here with me today is Rachael Real from Rachael Real Estate. Hi, Rachael.
Hello, Jen. Hey, Saul. How are you?
I'm doing good, Rachel. How are you?
I'm fabulous.
And we have Saul Klein with us today. Saul, give us some context. Is the MLS going out of business?
Yeah, no, that's just a tagline that we threw on there.
What are we talking about today?
But the fact is, and we can talk about a lot of things because there's a lot of news. There's a lot of things going on. But one of the big things that got a lot of attention is this purchase of a company called Black Knight, which is known in the real estate industry. It's a data company and also like an MLS vendor. That's how.
Yeah, they're like the they're like the back end of a couple of
They were purchased by a company called ICE, which is the Intercontinental Exchange, for $13.1 billion. Now, the sale's not final. It has to jump through all the regulatory hoops and everything to make sure there's no.
That's a lot of money. Did you say billion?
13, yeah, with a B, right? 13.1 billion they paid for that company. That's like, people look at multiples of companies, like a company will, so like in real estate, we use gross income multipliers or different ways to come up with a value based on a revenue stream, a multiple. And so companies.
So if that's the value, wow.
It sold for like 11 times its revenue. So it was a very good valuation for Black Knight, for the company, and really an acquisition for the Intercontinental Exchange that fits into the jigsaw puzzle that ICE is putting together to modernize the residential loan marketplace and the residential loan process, which includes so many things we don't think about in real estate and on the real estate sales side. And that is all of the work that takes place after the loan is placed and the servicing of the loan and the prepayments and all those and the replacing of funds. So the financial marketplace is building this digitization and been at it for a number of years now.
Right.
And the company doing it is ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange, and they just bought a company that's in the real estate data space. So that's significant, right? Now, what makes it even more significant is that's not the first company they purchased.
What is ICE?
It is a company that owns, its primary interests are in owning entities that are involved in investments. Okay. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, everything, right? Owning the exchanges.
Okay.
Right, where all this transaction takes place. That you want to own the house, right?
Yeah.
Because everything, so we're talking a lot of money, and how it was ICE was put together, that's another story for another day. The fact is that they just bought this company. They bought Black Knight, but before that, they bought a company called Ellie Mae, and they bought a company called, they bought Black Knight. They bought a company called Simply File. They bought Simple File. They bought a company called MERS, and it was all around getting all of the information and data around a real estate transaction, so that like as many people involved in a real estate transaction pass through their funnel as possible.
Right.
Right.
So when you say modernize, like you're saying you could see that they have a goal to modernize the lending, like the process of lending. Like, and when you say modernize, I just hear like make it simple, which means like maybe make it tighter, make it more streamlined, take the profit out.
Not take the profit out, take the hands out, take the costs out.
The cost, okay. Which increases your profit.
And a big cost is risk.
Okay.
Right? The big cost is risk. And so how do the people even make all these loans to borrow this, and people borrow money, and there's great risk involved. And so where's that risk set today? It sets with what they call the GSEs, right? Fannie and Freddie, and they primarily buy these loans.
But that's the government, which is really us.
But they're not really the government. It's really a government separate. It's a different kind of entity.
Okay.
And it's got a history and what it's doing, and it happens to be profitable now. But if in fact there's default and there's a problem on the loan side, taxpayers are on the hook. And so there's this issue around risk. Because financial marketplaces are all built around risk. And so if you can eliminate risk, and one way is transparency, understanding everything that's there. And a big piece of this is people going through the home buying process that then, so when we say, can the MLS go away? Well, that was the header. The fact is that there's a lot of pressure in the industry today with litigation, where we don't know where it's going to go, with technologies, with companies that are already players in the industry. And there could be a point in time where the real estate I call it the legacy systems that we have in real estate, which includes brokerage firms, and just doesn't cut it anymore. And there are new big companies waiting on the sideline. And there will come a day when you have a mortgage market. You already have the beginnings of this, when mortgage marketplaces are the person who wants to borrow money gets directly in touch with the secondary money market. Those loans are manufactured on the spot because the buyer is qualified and the property is qualified, and it's manufactured and it's sold, and it travels up the chain to wherever it ends up in somebody's investment portfolio. And that's all happening. It's not like, oh, that's going to happen right now, nobody's doing it, so we don't have to worry about it. It's like, well, these are things taking place. And so our message to people who deal in loans and who sell real estate is, look for these technologies to work their way into your daily life. And so you should know about them, if for no other reason, your clients are going to hear about it. And remember, you want to differentiate yourself from your competition. And so knowledge is power. And one way to build trust and confidence in a relationship, sales relationship, is to demonstrate expertise.
Right.
You're the real estate professional. These are the kinds of, oh, nobody needs to know that. Well, I don't agree. I think these are things that will affect the people you're talking to, affect the people that you're dealing with, and will have a direct effect on your career, depending on how long your career is, right? And so I talked to some young people the other day, did a Zoom with them. I mean, they were young people. And so I said, you're the kind of people you really have to worry about this.
Right.
Because, it's not going to affect your grandfather that much, but it's really going to affect the way you do
But
business.
ICE buying Black Knight. So Black Knight, as we know it, I'm sure they must do other things too, but as we know it, they're kind of like the back end system
Well,
some MLSs.
Yeah, look up a company called Collateral Analytics. So it's about data, information. We talk about being able to use the data to get to insight. And so,
Right.
and at this point, kind of when we say get to insight, that really important insight from a capital market perspective is eliminating risk, right? If you can eliminate that risk, then you make that whole process less expensive. And so your asset either increases profits or it allows for decrease in expenses somewhere else, right?
So how does that purchase, like there's something missing for me about how that purchase relates to modernizing the loan process?
Well, that's one piece closer to the consumer. That data is critical to these other pieces.
I
right?
see.
As they bring all, and one of these kind of terms that, kind of foreign to me, probably to you too, is the thing they call this, and I think of Willy Wonka, right? The golden record. There is no golden record, and they're building a golden record. So if each one of us has it, and this goes into identity. If there's a golden record on each one of us, then it's got credibility. It's the golden record. So if somebody's going to put a loan on it and they go look at the golden record, it's not like this company says you don't pay your bills and this one does, and this is a FICO score and it's outdated. No, there's this thing now that's based on a lot more things. Right. And it's the golden record, right? And how do you put together this golden record? And that's part of the MERS acquisition. So this will make the process of lending less friction, they call it, right? Less human interaction.
But that's because that's like everything's going there, right? So like as we become a cashless society, everything becomes digital, then that's like part of it too.
That's another piece is you throw at some point you'll throw crypto capabilities on something like this, right? That's downstream ways, but yeah, for sure. So what we're talking about here is this major acquisition, and it came on the heels of information about a company called CoStar. CoStar's they're major player in the commercial space, and they're after the real estate space. They're coming after the residential real estate space, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? And they're telling people that's what they're doing, right? And they're already deeply embedded, and they've got, we talked about, they have HomeSnap and they have homes.com. They've got contracts and relationships with MLSs. This is good for MLSs because as long as you've got products of the MLSs. Yeah. But what happens if there's one of these lawsuits bankrupts MLSs? Yeah. Or what if the contract ends with HomeSnap And I don't know the terms of these data contracts and what's going to happen. But if the companies then have direct relationships with the
With the
consumer,
consumer, then you have no
agent,
negotiation power
then you
if
don't-
you're the
then you don't-
MLS.
then you
But
don't need that.
plus, even like some of the rules, like we've talked before about clear cooperation, that kind of encourages almost like off-market properties. Like I feel like we keep doing things to like get things off of the MLS. So I don't know. I mean, if it really did collapse, like if there really was no MLS, that'd be crazy, right, Rachel?
Well, see that,
It'd be a
that you know
little
what?
nuts, yeah.
So that's what you have to be. You really have to be thinking. I'm not saying that MLS is going away tomorrow. I'm an advocate of MLS, and I believe that MLS creates.
Well, yeah, and all the
great
countries that
marketplace.
don't have MLSs are trying to get MLSs.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I'm an advocate for MLS.
Grass is always
Have been
greener,
for years.
right?
Yeah.
But I would say that we go back to this question: what's currently possible, and if it were impossible, it would fundamentally change the way you do business.
Yeah, and no MLS definitely would.
would.
Right. It
Now,
would.
it's
Well,
not-
and we already know how it would be because most countries operate without an MLS, and it's like the Wild West. There's no exclusives. You could see the property advertised in 10 different places for 10 different prices. Everybody's like basically a buyer rep, but there's no exclusive on that end either.
That's wild.
You can't really charge that much because you don't have access to the data.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. So here's what's going to happen in the real estate. This is what I think. So this is an important question. What's currently possible, and if it were impossible, and people should sit around and do brainstorming sessions.
Right.
That's
right.
going to take a lot of wine.
Well, it's
A lot of wine, right?
yeah.
Or
Right.
we,
Whatever.
Mhm.
Right. You should sit around and talk about this. What's currently, what if there were no MLS? Because there's a way to get data today. There's just one way is you pay CoStar. That's what you're going to be. These companies are going to make money. That's what they're sitting on the sidelines, right? And they're doing, and they're putting their technologies. And what CoStar said is they were going to allocate like $200 million to integrate the software that they have.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know tons of agents that use HomeSnap, and you said they're owned by CoStar. But like, look at all the people that were using like .loop that's now owned by Zillow, or look at all the people that were using Zillow that's now a brokerage. I mean, in
the last year, I think I've had more phone calls from agents who are licensed brokers, but are not members of the MLS or the board or NAR, and they are just working completely independently and sourcing properties to show based on what they find on the internet. That
because
member
it's
of the public
syndicated everywhere.
But data's a commodity.
Everything is syndicated, right? They're not looking. We don't hold the data anymore, so they're just looking at it that way, and then calling to set up appointments and not negotiating their compensation. But that's another problem.
So that's something that agents have to learn how to use these platforms.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Because these platforms are there to make money from agents. And this, I heard Spencer Raskoff, he was the CEO of Zillow. I heard him on a podcast the other day, and someone was asking him about what were the plans with Zillow. Now he's a shareholder. He's not, a member of he's a shareholder. He's not the CEO anymore. Yeah. He said, well, the two main goals of Zillow were to, number one, improve the tools for agents. Improve the tools. Let me finish. So improve the tools for agents, and then increase Zillow's take. And so this is what Zillow's doing. They want to create good tool sets. And the reason they want to create good tool sets is because they get people to use them. And then the more and more people depend on them, then the more they're going to start taking more and more. So here's what they're smart. They don't need to be a real estate broker. They figured out a way to get a piece of the commission without being licensed.
They actually should have not been a broker. That was, I feel like that was dumb.
The reason they became a broker, I know this because this happened almost because of me, right? There was two people that had listings, ListHub and Point2, my company. ListHub got bought by Realtor.com, and my company got bought by Yardi. And as soon as it got bought, it got announced that Realtor.com had purchased ListHub. And Spencer called me, and he said he wanted to buy Point2, but we had already sold Point2. He wanted it because he knew that big chunk of his oxygen listings had just gone to Realtor.com,
which is not owned by NAR,
and it wasn't owned by NAR, but they were competitors with Zillow, so they could have eased. So he wanted to secure my company's listings, but I already sold it. And so for almost a year, Spencer would call me and I'd see him at events, and he'd want me to talk to Mr. Yardi, who owned, and convince him to sell it to Zillow. And so I would try to do that. And Spencer even came to Santa Barbara one time, and right, that's where he already was. And so, you know what happened? You already sold it to ListHub. And when you already sold it to ListHub then had 100%.
And that's not like.
So here's what happens. So ListHub ends up with 100%, and then ListHub decides to make the parameters around other companies using that data so strict that Zillow wouldn't want that data. And so it forced Zillow. How else can you get data if you're a portal?
The MLS, IDX.
You become a member, so you get an IDX feed. And that's why they became a broker, not for a commission. They became a broker so that they could get the data, because right, ListHub had taken the capability in point 2, which was their source of data, had been purchased by Realtor.com, which shut them off and forced them to, so that separate, right? So
but they weren't before getting IDX feeds from MLS before they became.
No, so what happened is they were getting
it
directly
from that's why it
ListHub
took 2
and point
days.
2. Huh?
That's why it took 2 days.
It might have.
the
So they
feeds
got
to
it.
come
So we
through,
were
right.
just syndicators, right? We were syndicating and sending this data out to all these different companies.
But why were we sending it? Why we are really off topic, but not really, right? Why was the MLS sending it to ListHub in point 2 that was to syndicate, right?
Uh-huh.
Right.
But those companies were owned by Realtor.com, which no, it's not owned by the
Well,
National
first of all, they
Association.
weren't owned by Realtor.com until 2010, late 2011. So before 2011, they weren't owned by Realtor.com. Point 2 was owned by Point 2, and ListHub was owned by ListHub, right? Two separate companies.
Okay, so Zillow was getting the feed
from each of those companies
until 2010, but they didn't become a broker until like what, 2020?
No, so 2011, 2011 is when the acquisition took place, and at that point in time, Point 2 was still providing data. ListHub wasn't, and ListHub then set out to get individual contracts with MLSs. It began that long process, which is what I done to get right, is to go out and to get these contracts from MLSs
for them to put them on the MLS.
Zillow began to do that, and that's not an easy thing to do. It became too much of a chore, and it became too expensive. And so, it's the easiest way to get all the data.
Oh my God, the barrier to entry to being a broker is 0. It's a test.
You get a broker's license and you join the MLS, and now you're entitled to an IDX feed. And that's why Zillow became a broker, to get the data.
We could take our data back. We couldn't take it from Zillow, but we could take it back. But then that would make Zillow stronger if we took it back and only allowed IDX feeds to brokers.
Now, if you did that, then that would make the fact that they became a broker a smart move.
Because I know, because then we're basically Realtor.com then goes down, and Zillow, right?
Yeah, right. All those third party portals disappear.
So there's a number of things that could happen with all this data.
Oh my God. I wish I was drinking. I took like a week off, and I'm still in that.
So there are the lion and the tigers and bears are coming over the hill. And the issue with the real estate business is that people are usually too busy doing all the day-to-day stuff to pay any attention to all these things that are 2 or 3 years away.
In reality, only about 15% of them are going to be in business anyway.
Well, and that too.
Very true.
So, but for those people who are the real estate professionals, where real estate is truly their business, then this is really important stuff. If your career is real estate, then you should be following this. And again, you should become the real estate expert.
Yes.
People don't come to you just for the transaction.
Well, and I think a real estate expert encompasses more than just understanding the value of the property, right? Like it encompasses knowing a lot of things about real estate as a whole. You agree?
Yeah. Well, and what happens though is people get involved, it's the transaction. And so that's where people will, I get the benefit that I bring to the consumer is in the negotiation, or things go wrong, right? So it's all like in the transaction.
Yeah.
Right. And really the transaction's all getting automated.
Yeah.
So the power of somebody who's a real estate professional does not lie in the step-by-step process that is the transaction.
Right.
That's going to get automated. What people have to focus on to the real estate professional is
you also, Saul, you are also licensed.
Well, you know the real estate, right? You know about the real estate. You know about these real estate models where you can buy fractional pieces of real estate. You know how crypto is involved in real estate. Why do you know that? Because you're telling everybody you're the real estate professional, right? So now there's there's other things that are more important perhaps than the babysitting of the transaction and all the
Right.
things that go wrong during that phase.
Right.
And you can focus the opportunities on other aspects and servicing the people, and maybe it will be for less money.
Mhm.
But as this transaction process is automated, what's going to happen is real estate's going to become liquid.
Mhm.
And so liquidity reduces risk.
Mhm.
And so, if you don't buy real estate if you think you're going to have to sell it tomorrow, with a wholesale
Right.
exception, right? If you think you're going to
Well,
have to, if you think
you
you're going to have
don't
to sell
buy the
it,
real estate
you don't. So
anyway.
you don't buy real estate. But if you knew that if you bought it today and something came up and you had to sell it, that there was a marketplace and it was liquid, you'd end up with more transactions, not less transactions.
Right.
Right. So the transaction is going to be digitized. It's going to be totally automated. It's a modernization.
That's happening.
It's
Yes.
all happening. It's on the loan side. It will spill over to the real estate side. It involves all these things we talked about, the cryptocurrency side, right? And the value that a realtor brings is not in the transactional piece, right? That's going to go
Right.
away.
Yeah.
And so the key to the future is figuring out where your human skills, where your capability is with regard to where does that fit in your
Mhm.
advisory capacity?
Right.
And
You become more of a consultant
you
rather
become
than
a
a
consultant,
transaction
right? And that's-
coordinator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people, yeah, that's good. Well, Saul, if people want to, because part of that is understanding the history and the context of what's going on, right? Because it's really hard to just read this stuff and be like, okay, but what does it mean?
What does it mean for me? Right.
Yeah. So how can people figure that out and know that and find that out?
Go to thedataadvocate.com, thedataadvocate.com. And we will have a newsletter soon, but it's really taken shape. And what we do is we're trying to talk about these things in such a way that they fit together. And that puzzle isn't just a bunch of scattered dots, but it really kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Rachel, if
Exactly.
people have a referral for you in Chicago or they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
The best way to reach me is via email at rreal@dealwithreal.com or on my cell at 630-542-8688.
Awesome. And well, thanks guys for being on Better Call Saul.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Thanks, all.
Bye.
Yeah.